Okay, hello everybody. I am Joanna Agius, and I established Deaf Aboriginal Services, and I'm really excited to work in partnership with Expression Australia. Both of us are collaborating tonight on this event, which is called the Yes Vote. Most of the deaf people, First Nations deaf people in the community, have been struggling in regards to the referendum and what the Yes Vote means for us. Therefore, we decided to have an informal yarn with everyone tonight. Okay, we're not going to talk politics. We're going to have a yarn, a discussion to understand what it means for us and how we feel in regards to our comfort level without being oppressed with racism. And because we're in the First Nations space, we come across many challenges. There's mixed ideas, mixed conversations, and it makes us really confused. So we have a special guest tonight, Dale Agius. He's a Naranga man from South Australia, and he's online tonight with us to have that discussion in regards to the yes vote. Now, first, before we begin, I'd like to invite Tegan to do the acknowledgement of country. Over to you, Tegan.
I'd like to acknowledge our people, our traditions, and the land and connection to it, to the water, animals, sky. I'd also like to give gratitude for what our elders have done for us in establishing that connection, and we show our respect to them, to our elders past, present, and emerging.
Thank you so much, Tegan. That was really beautiful. That acknowledgement to country was fantastic. Now, if everyone can please introduce yourselves. We'll start with Hayley first. And then we'll go around the screen.
I'm standing on Darkajan country. My name is Hayley, and this is my sign name. My mob is for Wimmera area from Newcastle. Thank you.
That's lovely, Hayley. Thank you. Now, Tegan.
My mob is the Wurundjeri people, and we are from the North Coast.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And my name's Tegan.
This is of course.
My name.
Exactly. Beautiful. Thank you. Now, Simone, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Simone. I'm a Naranga woman from South Australia, far north. And I've moved to Tasmania, and I live here now. And my cousin is Joanna.
Thank you. Thanks, Simone. Now, Dale, over to you. If you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to come for a yarn. And so good to hear all your welcomes and knowing that we were on a different country. So I'm Dale Agius. I'm a Kaurna Naranga man. So, of course, connections over to the Yorke Peninsula and here in Adelaide metropolitan area. And, of course, I've been appointed as the First Nations Commissioner here in South Australia, which means I'm an independent person. I'm not a politician, and I'm also not a bureaucrat. So I can speak very directly and frankly on how I communicate with community, also how I communicate and engage and give feedback to the government and to members of parliament. Also, I can cut through and speak very directly with the public service without being having to toe the political line. I get to speak very openly and freely around what's working, what's not working, what the advice is from our community. When I see too much red tape, when I see bureaucracy not representing our issues in a clear and concise way, which reflects the needs and requirements from our communities. So very fortunate position. And also it's the only position in the country where we've got an independent commissioner working in the state process to bring a state voice together. If we had a commissioner in every state, we could probably get a lot more clear messaging across how the state works and interacts with the government, what issues we're facing, and could also probably connect into the federal space. My background in terms of what I've done leading up to this work is I've been the Director of Aboriginal Practice and Partnerships in the Department of Human Services. I've been the Manager of Metropolitan Aboriginal Youth Family Services, which looks after all those families who are having trouble with their young fellas getting in contact with the justice system, which could mean, you know, contact with police, contact with the courts, having issues at school and education and dropping out, you know, having some issues with peer pressure and their social groups and leading each other down the wrong path. But also, you know, issues in the classroom with that school, and they feel like they can't be involved with the classroom and they don't rock up or show up for regular attendance. And as we know, could be problems at home, relationship with their parents, relationship with siblings, and having trouble at home, and just want a positive role model to help them to be able to engage with the system, you know, including school, sporting activities, arts and craft, all those things like normal young people do. That was for that space. I also was the facilitator at the Rehabilitations Program Branch in Corrections, which is working with high-level serious offenders for high violent crime and high sex crime, who are doing group therapy work in the prisons in each state. So you have to sit in the room with about 15 offenders and have a little beeper, and, you know, making sure I was safe and making sure my facilitator was safe, co-facilitator was safe. So I did that I worked in corrections for about 10 years. I'm also the president of my local football club, Kilburn Footy Club. And I'm also the chairperson of the state football netball carnival, which we just had on the long weekend. So very, very busy, very busy.
Wow.
Wow, Dale.
So I guess,
sorry. So you, I guess, as a member of, well, you're not really a member of Parliament. So how did you get involved with the yes or the referendum? How did that begin?
so it was pretty funny, actually. Of course, so I got appointed as South Australians Commissioner, and then the Attorney General, Minister Kaurna, asked me to attend a national Closing the Gap conversation with all state leaders from across our state, from across our country, sorry, with all the state Aboriginal Affairs ministers. And he asked me to do a presentation and talk to them about an initiative that we did in Department of Human Services, working with transitional people in Adelaide. So around about 200 people who used to come through Adelaide, and for me to do a bit of a presentation to that group. And it was at that group where Federal Minister, of course, our Federal Indigenous Affairs Minister, Linda Burney, was there as well. And she asked me if I wanted to, as the Commissioner for South Australia, if I would like to sit on the National Referendum Working Group. And so I got a bit of the connection of and understanding what's happening in South Australia, and being the only state who are designing and leading that. Then also being they've been working on the South Australia, on the National Referendum Working Group, and sitting along our very strong leaders, Marcia Langton, Tom Calma, Auntie Pat Anderson, Noel Pearson, ex-Federal Affairs Minister Ken Wyatt, Marcus, forget his last name, he was the co-chair of the Victorian process. So all those national leaders, I was lucky enough to sit at the table with them and see them engaging with the high national space and all those high level movers and shakers, and seeing how our strong leaders engage and talk to them, and how they have to do all their political awareness to get our issues on the table. I was so fortunate to sit at that table and learn from them.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Also, I remember I was following your social media feeds. You went to the community in South Australia, travelled all over South Australia to get a lot of feedback from the community. So there's a lot of travel involved there. In the community, do you feel that the community themselves, like on a political landscape, do you think, how do you think they feel in regards to politics? Do you feel that they're watching, or do you feel like they have a voice that they can stand up and say anything, or do you think they're pretty much laid back or a little bit withdrawn?
Yeah, that's what I had to think about when I first went to communities. When I started doing my first round of engagements, so I did 2 rounds. The first round was to speak to them directly about their ideas on how a voice to Parliament could work in South Australia, and what they think was important about that, how they think it should work, what would the model look like, what would need to be considered in the legislation, those sorts of questions. And I went across and did about 30 public sessions across our state, going all the way from Oodnadatta, Riverland, Murray Bridge, Mount Gambier, Far West Coast, Adjuna, Port Lincoln, Yalata, Scadesco. Every one of our Aboriginal communities, for the first round, I went and spoke to them directly for that first round. And every time I went to the first round, community leaders always greeted me. I'm going to get a little bit emotional because every time I went there, they said they'd be waiting for me, because they wanted to speak about our business. They wanted to really, they knew that I was coming, but they knew that I was coming as a messenger for our business, not because of me, but because they wanted to keep talking about what was important to them. And then for the second round, it was a bit more full on too.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Wow. So I think it's really important to develop that rapport and trust within the community, isn't it? Because trust is really important, especially for somebody from Parliament, like speaking on behalf of all of us. Just one person, there's a lot of trust that goes into that. So a lot of hard work goes into the rapport building, I guess, which is fantastic. Now, I'm just going to let the others that are online to ask some questions if they have any questions at all. Maybe anybody have any questions for Dale? No? You're shy.
I can share some more stuff around the second round and the legislation and the model, and then talk about how Commissioner Thomas also spoke in Parliament with Commissioner's independent report, and what it looks like to the first time in South Australia when we tabled an independent report containing South Australia's views with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and then taking that to the Parliament and saying, right, you politicians talk about this now, not about what you want to talk about and think what's important for us. This is directly from us to use.
Yeah, if you could do that, that would be great. Thanks, Dale.
So the second round then, so I got my legal team and my policy team to put together some draft legislation. And then from the draft legislation, put that through the agency with the Attorney General's Department, through the parliamentary drafting team. Because what we've got in our South Australian model is to incorporate the South Australian voice within the processes of Parliament, so it becomes standard process and standard operation within the process of the Parliament chamber. So it's not something that sits outside, alongside, underneath, below. It's something that sits fair and square in the middle. So that's the way we wanted to work because of the feedback we got from our community. Then the model, what I found from all the communities is they felt very isolated, separated and disconnected, particularly from all local councils. You know, they can't engage at local level. They can't put together local solutions. They've got no structure to support local coordination. They've got no infrastructure to lead their own community initiatives. So they want something to be incorporated with regions being supported to structure up at each region to be able to come together to work through issues as a community of people within those regions. And some of those include encompassing multiple nation groups. And this is a different way of working for our mob because, of course, we know with native title, always working against each other, trying to work out where their boundaries are and trying to be very direct around who does what on his country. This was very social, very broad about, you know, we're all experiencing some very crisis issues from housing, contact with police, accessibility to education, working with local councils to come up with their local council solution groups with their programs, and local councils engaging with Aboriginal community members on the ground, and also having strong reconciliation action plans. And those reconciliation plans should have the views and input from local Aboriginal people, not just from non-Aboriginal staff members in council. So we've got the legislation and now the 6 regions in South Australia. And so the 6 regions is where we will go to elections. So in each region, we have 7 nominees. So 7 nominees for each region because our community said they wanted to work side by side with each other, not just having one and one person speaking on behalf of everyone. We wanted a collective group to speak, to share the issues, to share the load, to share the cultural load, to share the compounding issues that our communities face, the complex issues that our communities face. And they wanted to work together because they know that speaking at the higher end of local council, with state authority organisations, with the NGO sector, with the YOCO sector, and also with public service officers and with parliamentarians, they didn't want to sit there by themselves. They wanted to sit there together and work together.
Yeah.
So 7 in each region, in 5 regions, and then 11 in Adelaide because, of course, Adelaide got higher population. And then we'll structure up and support local regional members to be elected in each local region. From there, each region gets to choose 2 co-chairs, 1 male, 1 female, and they will take up the positions and formulate the state voice. So 6 regions, 2 co-chairs, 12 will do the state voice. And the state voice, they're the ones that get to engage with the Parliament of South Australia. They get to do 4 key things. They get to table an annual address or an annual report into Parliament with a joint sitting of the Upper House and Lower House. And that report is from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander co-chair's perspective, going from the priorities, what they've got from all their 6 regions, and saying to the Parliament, this is what we're presenting to you. You politicians need to listen to what we got to say from our communities. Not trying to score political points around our business and our affairs and our communities, but hearing directly from us. Now, the second thing we get to do, we get to speak with the Premier and his cabinet, the government of the day, twice a year, because we want to know what's the government thinking, what are they planning, what policies are you thinking about designing and implementing, how are you doing that, who are you consulting with, when are you making these decisions? Then the third one, we get to speak to the Premier and to public service chief executives, because that's who has the responsibility to deliver the outcomes of the government of the day. They have a portfolio responsibility, and the state voice will want to engage with them and understand what's happening in all their agencies, because every single agency across the state government does their own thing, and they achieve the outcomes through different means and different ways. And sometimes we, the community, don't know what they're doing or how they're doing it and who they're talking to. Or sometimes they're talking to everybody all at the same time, and all of a sudden we're over-consulted. So then the fourth one is to speak to the Premier, any minister, and any public service chief executive, because we want to keep them all accountable. No more handballing around, shifting the blame, blaming the opposition, blaming a minister, blaming a public service chief executive officer. This annual engagement hearing gives us a chance to say, you said you were committing to delivering this outcome, and these agencies and these ministers are responsible. Why hasn't it been done? And we get to put that done in a public way, because we know that these things might happen through some advisory bodies that we've got in place right now, but that information isn't shared with no one. No one knows. It's all kept sensitive and confidential within government, and no one knows if they're doing the right thing or not. So the community have said we want something to be more public accountable. We should be holding our parliamentarians to the same level of account for our business as what they do for every other Australian's business. Let's bring this stuff into light, not keep it behind closed doors. So that's what happened through the when I was appointed, did my 2 rounds of engagement, drafted the legislation and the model, tabled 2 reports to make them publicly viewable so everyone can know what's going on. And those reports are designed with Aboriginal feedback front and centre. So a bit different to the standard, government report with their language and all their ideas of being front and centre, and then our issues just dumping in on the bottom end. No. These reports were done with front and centre for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander views. And then it went through the Parliament process. Did anyone come to the Parliament to see the Attorney General table the voice bill in Parliament? No. So we had about 100 community members attend there. About 100 of our community come and see the Attorney General. I'll send the photos through of him tabling the bill. All of our people sitting in the gallery. Another 50 upstairs watching it as he done it live. Big emotional day. Was all getting goosebumps because it was the first time it was being tabled in our First Nations bill was being tabled in the country. And then, of course, on the 23rd of March this year, we had a special parliamentary ceremony where the bill was being passed through the lower house and the Premier was reading it. Did any of you come to that one? Because that was another public one.
Oh, let me just say, I didn't actually see it in person, but I saw it online. I think there was an interpreter there that provided us access. Yeah.
No, there were also in newspapers and things like that. It wasn't there. It was very difficult for us to read and engage with because our primary language is Auslan. So it was really quite difficult to know what was happening and what the events were coming up.
Yeah. I'll send the links through so you can all watch them and get them translated to see what was going on, because the Premier, when he was talking in Parliament, made some very good reference about, this voice bill isn't about politics. This voice bill should support bipartisan support. So all parliamentarians should support that, because this is going to only enhance the engagement that the Parliament has with Aboriginal communities directly. And that only enhances our democratic process through the Parliament. So very important to hear what he's got to say and see what he's got to say, because it carried a lot of strength. And, it was a lot of honesty with the government, with them admitting that they don't always make the best decisions through their current systems when engaging with our communities. And we don't hear that too often.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I have one question from Joanne. So just one question for you, Dale, but hopefully the others will have questions as well. So if you're itching to ask questions, just ask them. So a question for you, Dale. Do you have you met with most of the community members? Have you come across any issues in regards to those houses? But my major question is, have you heard about any issues to do with First Nations peoples with disabilities? Only because we have a mob of First Nations people with disabilities that are having issues at the moment, irrespective of their deaf, hard of hearing, mobility, access, etc. So you've got First Nations Aboriginal community members, and then you've got those who have a disability. So in the constitutional parliament, I don't know, I'm just wondering what it means for us as First Nations deaf mob. Can you explain something on that?
Well, I guess how we can explain it, because of the South Australian model, is that we know that disability experience from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have different requirements and needs in each region. And so what we've got is, we've got the government normally doing blanket approaches and blanket criteria. And if you don't fit the criteria, well, then you miss out and you get nothing. What we can do with the regions now is be very specific around what's happening with the disability requirements in each region, and have a bit more informative information with what we need to address in each of those regions. Because we've got our state South Australian body, so sorry about using the state, hopefully you'll get something one day, but we're able to now do in South Australia a regional information gathering, provide the priorities to the state parliament, and the state parliament, if the referendum is successful, to have a direct line of sight to how the national parliament's responding to all these requirements and needs of our disability communities. And you can only imagine if we had a voice parliament in every state, which had regional bodies connected to them, would be able to inform the parliament directly of what we need in each region, and also the challenges and the barriers of what's being faced in each region to access services, and why they're not hitting the ground quick enough, because the criteria that's blanket and general, because they say that you're all the same, it makes it hard to apply or to get even recognition or credit of some disability services. And then all of a sudden, like it's all too hard, you've got so much paperwork to fill out. By the time you fill it out, the program's finished. Yeah, so how that needs to work and shape up in the federal voice is, it's been called now a Canberra voice, and Canberra making all the decisions at a very high level, without understanding what's happening in each of our communities, without even understanding what's happening in each of our states. So we've got, some bureaucratic advisor, some person who they connect to with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent, who they trust because that's their political friend, and they give them the voice to represent all of our needs, rather than sort of having someone who we elect and we nominate and who we trust to take our matters forward. Non-political, just very directly and very frankly on what's been experienced by our people, and taking that to them and saying, this is what we need to address.
Yeah, wow. Dale, I was just wondering, thank you so much for explaining all of that. I was also wondering, say, for example, if the Yes vote got through, what type of access would we as First Nations deaf communities members receive from, I guess, the after effects of the Yes vote and representation in Parliament? Will we receive more information, or we'll be able to have access to interpreters to get that information, maybe even if the interpreter is on television, so that we can all access that? Will the Parliament commit to providing that type of access services for deaf and hard of hearing community members?
Well, what we're about to do is be able to say them to more clearly, that's what we need. And then to say, the millions and millions of dollars you're doing in all the other things, they're better off responded if we sharpen up and you give $1 million here, $1 million there, $1 million there, and $1 million to what we actually need to hear and listen and be involved, to sharpen up the way that government engage with us. And then particularly when we've got, the deaf community who are missing out completely because there's no service to them to help them get involved with the whole conversation. That's all being missed because it's not important to the politicians, because the numbers are probably so small, they're not going to win votes. They're not going to win power for that. So that's the difference between, it being a political agenda or it being a social agenda, because that's what our communities are asking for. And that goes to the heart of, you can sort of see now the referendum conversation is very political, very racial based. It's not even talking about engagement, consultation, requirement, and needs. It's lost that. And that's not what the intention of what the voice is. The intention of the voice is to escalate and elevate the requirements of our communities, and for us to be talking about that, not about all this other political jargon and them trying to win political points and political promotions and all that other stuff where the conversation's gone now. That was not the intention of the voice, and it's not what the intention of the statement from the heart is.
I've got a question for you, Dale. Just for example, First Nations businesses have been under a great deal of pressure because of policy, because of government policy, and they fail. But I wonder if the voice will have an impact on that, providing much more support, because up until now, those businesses haven't had the support. And this enables us to show the government what we need. So that's kind of a really good example, maybe.
Good example. And that's exactly right, because we know that economic development and economic participation has now become one of those great achievable aspiration things that our community want to get involved with. We don't want to rely on government services. We want to create our own business, create our own services for our communities.
Yeah, exactly.
But what we know is the government helps us get the foot off the ground and then leave us to sink or swim, because there's not enough direct consultation with Aboriginal businesses to engage with the policies that are designed within Parliament. Again, they're invisible to the Parliament. The Parliament just see the big investment, the massive investment going in terms of the dollar that they spend. But because of the misguided advice in the way the policy is designed, the way the policy should adapt and be more target focused for our communities, because, business development and business management, for our communities is relatively new. I know we've got some who are very strong and very good at it, but in general, in our population, not a lot of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people run and operate and own their own business. So it's something that probably needs to be looked at and sharpened out, in terms of it's not all about receiving services with health, education, and all those outcomes with housing and all that sort of stuff. It's also about putting us in a position to create our own wealth dependence, and through the participation of the economy with other things that we design and come up and create, and how we get supported through that. Again, we've probably got a non-Aboriginal bureaucrat who does a government review with some evidence and data, breaking us down to numbers, and then that's been fed back to the Parliament, and that's the way they engage in the business of the space of what we've got for economic participation, which, as we know, as a lot of our other social indicators, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Hayley?
And for example, in remote regional areas, the support from the government that's provided, and they utilize a lot of expenditure for that, but it's only, a month's worth of what the community needs. And with that voice, we'll be able, with the voice to Parliament, we'll be able to self-determine a lot better to benefit our community and have the access that we need without that government intervention. The government's at the moment just ticking boxes. They're like, you know, we've given you all of this stuff, but they're not looking at it from a community perspective.
Yeah, that's right. That's the way that they look at us, and that's the way they do business with us. That's the way they engage with us. That's the why this importance of consultation has been front and center with the way the upcoming referendum's been shaped and formed. Unfortunately, you know, we know as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we need more consultation with the government. But you know, the public think that they already do that, and they already measure it, and they respond to it, and
and they don't,
and they meet all of our needs because they throw the money out to us. But we know that if it's misguided advice, and it's not going to the various variety of what we've got with our business development opportunities, you know, because we might be more vast. And not only that, non-Aboriginal people can't create Aboriginal cultural responsive businesses because that's us. So they've got no understanding of what that is. So it's just little things like that. They're not massive things. It's just about understanding the little tweaks on when policies and fundings are being rolled out, just to make them hit the mark that much more, because that much more in terms of what might make a difference to 4 or 5 or 6 people will lift the indicators of the closing the gap indicators, you know, because they'll actually make a direct impact.
Yeah, just from Joanna. And also there's that famous saying, isn't it, for the First Nations people, you need to fit around us rather than us fitting around them. So I think it's about them trying to fit around us. Yeah, you know, there's that famous quote that people say. Okay, now, Tegan. Hayley, you want to ask more questions? Wow, you're on a roll tonight. Yep, keep it coming. Yeah, it's a perfect opportunity to ask Dale questions.
Yep.
What makes the referendum, this is our sign for it, why is it different from a normal vote, you know, at election time, where you tick or cross whatever your selection is? Here we have to write yes or no, the actual word, on the referendum. And the Constitution's only been voted on 8 times, and it's a really challenging process. There's so much that has to take place to achieve a change in the Constitution. So only 8 have been successful. And this is why the voice is so important. And I want people to support us, you know, with the yes vote.
Yeah, it's a different process because we're trying to ask a question, well, the government's trying to ask a question on if the Australian population do agree with what they're proposing in the alteration. So that's yes or no. You know, because we tick a box at the normal election process because we're ticking or we support that political party. But this is actually articulated in a way to address a certain alteration question. Have you seen the question at all? Have you seen the proposed question? I think I've got it, and I'll try and read it out.
The question, what exactly do you mean, from Tegan?
So the federal government, through their civics information campaign, have released the phrasing of what the referendum question is likely to be. I'm just trying to bring it up on my laptop, and I'll read it. So the proposed referendum wording, the question at the ballot paper when you're going to vote, is a proposed law to alter the Constitution to recognise the First Peoples of Australia by establishing an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice. Do you approve of this proposed alteration? And you answer yes, or you answer no. If you don't answer yes or no, your vote's nulled.
Right. Yeah. So you need to actually write on the ballot paper.
Yes.
If you don't write or you spell it incorrectly, then your vote doesn't count. It just gets thrown in the bin.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's very important that we encourage all of our mob to write the words yes, because we're finding out that the vote, as you know, it's very tense. It's going to come down to every vote counts because you need a double majority. You need a double majority, so you need to win a majority of states. So we need to win 4 states, and we also need to win a majority of the population overall. And so what's been proposed in the question is the proposed alteration is in 3 parts. So number 1 is that there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. Number 2, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And number 3, the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have the power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, its functions, its powers and procedures. That's where you get into some of that conversation with the constitutional lawyer experts who talk about, the voice having too much power, not enough power, everything going to the High Court. So all of that stuff is coming out of the 3 parts that we've just read out just there. But it's very clear, in particular in part 2 and 3, that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice may make representation to the Parliament and Executive Government, which means they don't have to do it. What it means is they're getting independent advice from an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander representative, and then the Parliament still decides on how to respond to that advice. But what it's doing is it's making them more publicly accountable and more publicly scrutinised, because if they do something and it doesn't work, they have to answer to it, and they answer to the Australian people. And that's what our communities are asked for. No more doing these things for political votes or behind closed doors. We're in confidential relationships with who you select and handpicked. That's not working. And number 3, the Parliament shall, subject to the Constitution, have powers to make laws with respect to the matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, which includes its composition, functions, powers and procedures. Noel Pearson speaks to this very well. He says, so all the decisions around how the Parliament, how the voice operate and functions still lays with the power of the Parliament. So all this other stuff that, in the media, what's being buffed out with some politicians is not what's being proposed. And that's where they call that sort of disinformation, non-factual information, lies and truth-telling, all that. That's that conversation coming out, because it's not what's actually being proposed. And some of that what's being proposed goes to the intended legislation. And the Attorney General tabled the intended legislation in his speech to Parliament, which sort of sets the remit or the boundaries on what the legislation is intended to do. And then it's been said from that process to now has gone a little bit over the top, which is what they call fear campaigning.
I've got another question for you, Dale, or comment. A positive is if the yes vote gets through, it means that the government has to make amendment to the Constitution. And then there's the 4-year voting cycle. They cannot remove the changes to the Constitution. And that's a real positive, because we've been advocating for this for so long, and it's time that this amendment is made to the Constitution. And I like the Uluru statement model. for First Nations people, their board members are 6 First Nations people and 4 white people. Because if it was equal numbers, 5 of each, then there would be this constant argument. But now that we've got a monopoly, it means that we have much more power in relation to what is brought forward. And it'd really be good to see a representative from deaf or hard of hearing communities sit within that group as well.
Yeah, so what it would do is the Constitution will acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the First Peoples, and through that, it'll state we want meaningful engagement with the government and the Parliament by establishing a First Nations voice. Now, so that's been supported through a constitutional change through a referendum. But what that also means is, because some people say it's permanent, it's not permanent. We can change that through another referendum if we want to down the track. So our constitution is changeable by any referendum. It just depends on the social understanding of the day of the people in that country. All right, so that's an important one because we know that some of the political leaders have been saying once it's in, it's permanent. Well, that's not. Nothing in the constitution is permanent because it's changeable by referendum. With this process, of course, we want to include our people in there, which seems to be supported across many of the community. But what people are a little bit hesitant about and fearful of is us having a voice. And, that's a little bit because of the messaging that's being put out. But as we know, we need that sense of empowerment within our voice to speak our truth, to speak our stories, to speak what is not working, to speak about how to improve it. And that would only help all Australians because it will cut waste. It'll cut the system. It'll make things more exposed. We'll see what's really going on in the Chamber of Parliament. So that's what we're saying in terms of the messaging is, this isn't a referendum for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. This is a referendum for all of us because we know there's a lot of good intentions, a lot of goodwill, a lot of investment. All those things are happening, except the outcomes on the ground just aren't resulting as positively as they should. What we know is when we get to the referendum,
right, Dan.
Once we get to the referendum process, what they call the post-referendum process. So then once the referendum is done, we then go to consultation to design the federal model, like I did with the state process. I've done the consultation rounds to go and talk to everyone to design it. They'll do it with the national process. Then they'll have to introduce voice legislation into the federal parliament, and that'll take bipartisan design, which means all members of parliament have ability to contribute to the way the voice is designed after the referendum. So this stuff about, it's already shaped and already designed, people already decide it's going to be elected, picked, there's elites, they already know who they're going to pick, is another incorrect misinformation. That's not what the process is. And then there comes the implementation phase when they do the implementation, maybe 6, 8, 12 months after the referendum, when they've got everything all supported through, and we'll have our first voice up. So part of that, that design phase will include how the representatives are selected for each state and who should be able to have some voice in there. Because particularly, say if we do it in South Australia, because, some of our South Australian deaf community members might nominate, and all of a sudden you've got a representative on the state voice. And all of a sudden the voices that you fellas need are elected and picked, and, not only your requirements and needs, but all those other requirement needs with disability services who are missing out, because as you people talk and connect with what's happening with the more broader disability network, that can come to the table. And then once you've got an elected member on that, because, not all of our members should be public servants. They shouldn't all be academics. They shouldn't all be sports people. They shouldn't all be STEM students. They should all be people that represent the diversity of our community, to give the opportunity for all of us to speak around all of our social issues. Because then if you get a connection between, state and federal. And
that's really hard.
Yeah. And once we get the ability to speak there, though, and you imagine how complex and hard it is now, trying to speak about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander required services to the current system, and it's almost like it's invisible.
Yeah.
Talk about disconnected and no voice. So what we're able to demonstrate in South Australia is you can have region, state, national connection. If one of our South Australian fellas here put their hands up to nominate and they get elected, all of a sudden it's a voice. It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, does anybody else want to ask any questions? Tegan, Simone?
I just wanted to ask, in the deaf community, there's lots of argument between white fellas and the Aboriginal community about the referendum. But I don't really think they understand clearly about the information. They're thinking that we just use the government for more financial gain, but they don't understand that we need to collaborate around policy and government and politics and work together. It's a little bit like they don't want to do it. They're like, oh, the Aboriginal people, they always want everything. And, we're trying to get up and explain to them so that they understand, but they don't really get it, I don't think. So we have to be determined to make our way through to explain a different perspective to them, to give them the depth of the information so that they understand it's not just us asking. They need to understand how important it is. We're doing it for First Nations people all over the world too. It's not just us.
Yep.
I'd just like to add something too, if I can, from Hayley. I understand and I agree with you absolutely, Simone. But lots of white people are really fearful of a yes vote. They think we're going to kick them out of Australia. They don't understand, since Federation, we've wanted to work together. They don't really, please, we don't want to be in front of you. We want to work side by side. White people are like, no, you want everything. Yep. You want to take advantage of everything. That's and it's not like that at all.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good. It's great that we've got Joanna and Hayley and all the people here who are able to explain to community in a way that they can understand that it's about working together and it's about correcting the mistakes. But because they don't have the information, they think it's just this really simple yes or no. They don't understand the complexity of the vote and the depth of the information, because there's not enough information that's accessible to them. They're like, oh, I don't want to support that, because they don't have the understanding of the opinions. They don't understand that we're really wanting to work collaboratively as a nation to get rid of these barriers.
That's right. Tegan.
Yeah, there's lots of people who have come up to me and wanted translated information about the votes. What will happen if you vote yes or no? What will happen in the future? And what sort of evidence people have. So they're a bit stuck on the information. They want to know what will happen after the vote. And they need more information given to them so that they can pass that on. And I can translate it for them, yeah, but I don't want them to ask me of my opinion. You know, it's their choice. They shouldn't ask me whether they should vote yes or no. I can't answer that question. I don't want them to just copy what I say. I want them to have an informed opinion. Yeah. Thanks, Hayley, so much too for your clarity. That's awesome. To answer to you, Tegan, I think it's really, really hard when it comes to translation of material, because if you have a bias, people can see it. They use you as a role model, you know, so it's really hard. With translation, you have to be really neutral. We can't
Yep.
show our biases.
Yep, that's right.
No, but you have to read it on your own. And if you don't understand it, then ask someone who can translate it into Auslan for you. But they have to feel comfortable with it. You can't insert your opinion. You know, we're not trying to drag people over to our sides in a sense. We want people to make that informed decision. And they don't understand that sometimes people need to vote together to understand the material. You know, they just don't have access to that.
I just want to add on to what Tegan and some have said in regards to translation. So I did one translation. I was partnering with Expression Australia. When we went through that actual process, did the translation work, we weren't allowed to be biased. We had to remain neutral. So like what Hayley was saying, we had to completely remain neutral. We receive the information and pass it on. That's basically it. So with the translation, we can't decide on yes or no. We just have to remain completely impartial and maintain our boundaries and just pass on that information. That's it. Because we're just doing a translation, an Auslan version for the members of our community. And that's basically our role, our job. So I know, Tegan, it's not easy, is it? It hasn't been easy at all, but the same with me too. I'm like, I'm delivering this information, but I need to make sure that I'm doing it correctly.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
to make sure that I'm following the right process, so I'm not influencing. Yeah, you're right. So we have a team of people. We have the interpreters. We have another team too who are involved in the process, just to make sure that information is interpreted correctly. And there's also different perspectives on that too. So when you read or hear information out there, you get a mental vision of what that's going to look like. So, yeah. Now, I just want to wrap up if I can because of the time. Maybe just one or two more questions, but just bear in mind that the community, not the First Nations deaf community, but the community in general, have asked about what does it mean? Well, this is their concern. I'm going to ask Dale this question. So it might be a silly question, but anyway, I'm going to ask this question. Now, say, for example, if the vote is passed through, does that mean the First Nations, will the land be taken, or will that impact our sovereignty or anything like that? You know, the native title that you talked about before, our land, etc. So if the yes vote goes through, will that impact the native title?
Well, what we've got in South Australia is in the articulation of our legislation is that the First Nations voice legislation does not impede or intend to impede on native title legislation. So legislations can coexist together. So if the referendum gets up and there's a yes, all what we've got as part of the question, you know, part of the proposed alteration is to do those two things, you know, and I think we've got to make that very clear when we're talking. Like the proposed question is this proposed question. It says nothing about native title and land rights. They are already existing legislation pieces that are already passed through the parliament, that already have legislation and regulations underneath them. What we're asking for the referendum is this proposed alteration to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the Constitution and to give them a voice to Parliament. And on that, under the points 1, 2 and 3, have you got a torch on there or a candle, Tegan?
It's a light. I think it's dark.
Where are you hanging out?
I don't know your opinions, but I'm tired of hearing the word terra nullius, right? Because it means nothing. It means, in actual fact, if we translate it from Latin, it means that it was just vacant land. We are human. We are people. We have a voice that needs to be heard. So time needs to change.
Yeah. And, well, realistically, not every Australian has met an Aboriginal person. Not every Australian citizen knows the history of the settlement process, which is a little bit frustrating because, we've lived it now for over 200 years. But some people who have migrated here might only hear it for the first time 6 months ago. And so, understanding the historical settlement of our country, because, those comments being made that there's no legacy of the process of colonisation is so dismissive of what those policies were back during settlement process before terra nullius was overturned by the High Court and our people were just rounded up and put in emissions because legally they were allowed to and permitted to do that. And when you disconnect people from land, culture, suppress their language, not let them have their kinship cultural practices, it's like we say, it's on a process of being genocide. So we have to keep telling our new migrants this process so they get an understanding of where we're at as a people. Because probably like my grandma and your grandmas, they were all either on a mission, stolen generation, or lived off the land without being recognised as humans, and that's not that long ago. And so the understanding of the history, the true Australian history, because whether you're Aboriginal or not, this is Australian history now. When you can move to Australia, you take on the legacy of our history, but you also take on the pride of the longest living culture in the planet, on the planet. But you also take on the multicultural blend that we now experience and live in within Australia. And I guess explaining that all the time is very tiring from us as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people because it seems like we're the ones that have to do it all the time. So when we get things a bit more centered around having an elevated voice, because that's what we can do as part of the voice process, is to increase the process of truth telling. It could also support what needs to happen during a treaty conversation or a treaty process down the track, right? So as we know, treaties might take 1, 2, 3 decades to get some sort of negotiation process happening. And before they even signed off, it could be another 50, 60, 70 years before they come through. In the meantime, as being reported by the Productivity Commission, is that essentially all governments have been failing on their committed outcomes on how they engage with Aboriginal communities, and the indicators continue to fall behind. Something needs to change with the way the system is operating now, so we can turn around those indicators and go ahead and present our views from our communities in the Parliament where the decisions are made, and also to the executive government, while we're also doing our truth telling and our treaty conversations. Because if we keep going the way we're going, what we know is our leaders burn out. They get very, very tired. The strain on our communities become very complex and compounded. We have high-level mortality rates, high-level suicide rates, high-level education dropout rates, no access to health services, a lot of bad relationship with SAPO and police and the justice system. The cycle that we've got at the moment, if there's no high-level structural change, won't get better, and the productivity report supports that. So something needs to happen at such high-level structure reform for us to change the narrative and change the conversation so that we can do all the things that we want to do, and having a voice at the higher end and truth-telling and treaty conversations as we progress, because we know that Senator Thorpe wants to go down and have treaty conversations, but she's also said that she's not willing to sit in the next election, which means after 6 years, there's going to be no change to the structure that she's already working in, that we've already lived through. So it's okay to have a political position. That's what you got elected for. However, the reality of what happens with the structure, if it stays the same, is nothing changes.
Yeah. Yeah. Additionally,
Sorry, we're going to finish soon, but yes, go, Hayley.
I'm okay for time.
I hope that we can change the perspective of people's looking at that. You know we've got a history of colonization, but we want to change the narrative. We know that First Nations people lit a fire to welcome them. So
That's right.
it's the difference of perspective. They're stuck on this narrative of we lit a fire to get rid of them when it was a welcoming fire.
And it's all those things, but because it's not presented at the higher end or escalated at the higher end of our parliament, it's the status quo. And, then it becomes a debate between, okay, is the fire welcoming, or did Captain Cook had to charge the ground? We go through that continual narrative, that continued battle, that battle narrative, and, elected members who support the process of Captain Cook charging the ground and not having our perspective on that equal level within Parliament. It's always going to get the overarching support, which is all part about the truth telling and history telling of our country, and we only get that by having a voice at those tables. And we're not here to blame anyone. We'll accuse everyone. We're holding on to guilt and account to that. We're here just to have factual conversations as people of our country, and not to have our history swept under the rug, and not and no healing for us when we go to those conversations.
Yeah.
In my view. Anything else around concerns around it's a racial thing. It won't.
Joanna's frozen. Sorry, Dale.
Oh,
Am I freezing? Am I? No? Yes? Are there any questions before we close? Tegan does, but Joanna.
Tegan, you're just so blurry, Joe. Tegan, did you want to say something from Hayley?
Yep, go.
No, I've got no questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simone. You all good? Do you have any questions?
Yeah, if I can just put my microphone on to ask a question, I'll talk.
I can turn your
How do I
microphone on
do
for you.
that?
Can you hear me? Yeah. So I wanted to ask, because we're saying First Nation and Torres Strait Islanders, what was I going to say? I was going to ask, so that means not just South Australia, that means all over, am I right? So that means with not just, our mob, but every single mob, the first voice in each country. Is that what you mean? I would just trying to get it all together. Yeah.
You mean for South Australia or for the federal one?
So when they do, when you vote and all that, and it's not just, your own land, but you got all the mob all over, and you're explaining vote yes, vote no, but then, it's all your elders and all the mob coming in, and how do I explain it? So all us mob, all the First Nation, all us mob from all over. So
Yep.
There's only one person in each of our country, having that voice to be able to talk for us.
Yeah.
To make that vote, is that right?
Yeah. So what we're voting for is to have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and so that's what they've now been called politically as First Nations. To have a model design for them, to have the ability to interact within the system of Parliament. and speak to the Parliament and to the public and to the Commonwealth executive government. And that's for, what we've got now, and how they suggested they'll do it is by selecting representatives from a certain number of representatives in each state to go and speak on behalf of their state representatives to the nation, to the national Parliament. So that includes Torres Strait Islanders, that includes Tasmanians, that includes WA, fellas in Broome, that includes fellas in Queensland, WA, far north Queensland, southeast, everyone who's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander mob have a voice in some way, shape, or form, but it's going to be coordinated and structured.
Because everyone thinks it was just New South Wales, and they weren't thinking about all the mob. Like, that's why I reckon some people in the deaf community were only thinking, oh, it's only one state or one place in the area, but it's not. It's actually all of us. So, the bigger picture, the better. You get heaps of all of us coming together, pretty much.
You get all of our diverse perspectives put together in a way that's structurally aligned, and we can decide our own priorities. Not because we've got fellas in the east side of the country or the west side of the country telling us what to do here in South Australia. We're same us side of telling the eastern states how to do their stuff. They get to represent themselves, because we know that they've got their issues that they're facing. Because different needs or requirements change with each.
Because I know, how I would say Alice Springs, they have their voice. They speak out. And same with North Queensland, same with, New South Wales, same with every mob. You see how their voice is out there. It's just explaining why you should vote. They're giving their information to help us all agree and not to agree.
Yeah, well, they're helping to us to come together and put our collective issues together, and then to raise that up and escalate that to the Parliament. Because what we know, what they do is they always do this and that. They blame, they take responsibility, they pick their issues, they pick and choose. It's all chaos, there's no coordination, no structure. And then by the time we raise any issues up, they go through what we call a political cycle. It's where we've got to vote and elect again. And it's what we do, what they call when something comes off the political agenda. And then we get no continuous outcomes for our issues that we've been raising up for so long. Because there's no formal way of us doing that within the Parliament system or to the executive government. So this is what the change could be if we get a yes vote up, which is why for our First Nations mob, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander mob, why it's so important for us, because we know what it's like. We know what it's like to feel isolated and not heard.
I reckon if no one's hearing or listening, the fellas out there, they feel hurt. They feel like, I've wasted my time just for the government to hear my voice, to say something, but they don't have a say.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's what I meant, yeah.
Any other question?
I'm good.
I think that's it. Okay. All right, fantastic. Now, I just would like to express a huge thanks to you, Dale. Also, Tegan, Simone, and Hayley, and our interpreters, our fantastic interpreters, for being here tonight. And thank you so much for the discussions that we've had. And Dale, say, for example, if there's deaf community members that want to ask questions, are they okay to contact you? Can we forward your email address to them if they have any questions they would like to pose to you, Dale?
So best one for me to follow up is to do a couple of things. I'll send the links through. I'll send the civics information, which includes the alteration and the after referendum information. And then I'll send through Claire's email, because as you know, I'll be out talking with the Prime Minister, with the Premier. Very busy week. It won't get me this week. I go and meet with the Crows women's team and the Port women team tomorrow. So hopefully meet with Linda and get the girls to come and make a statement. in their Crowswell portcolours, and a supportive Yes Goons, Yes jumper to ground support from our sporting leading women here. But, you know, and then we've got something on at 10 o'clock, something on at 2 o'clock. I think I also sent you an invitation, Joe, to pass out to community, because tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. we've got a large community gathering happening at the park near the zoo, because we want to get, you know, 50, 80 community mob there to show support for the voice.
Mark's muted. Thank you so much for
It
the
was a
discussion.
really interesting discussion from everybody. Thank you so much for everyone participating
Thanks,
tonight.
everyone.
Bye for now.